You didn't do anything wrong. That's the part nobody tells you. You were present. You were consistent. You showed up. And somewhere between the moment things started to feel real, started to feel warm, and close, and significant, they started to disappear. Not all at once. Just gradually. The replies got shorter. The energy shifted. Something that used to feel easy started feeling careful. And you were left standing there, trying to figure out what changed. And this is where most people make their first mistake. They turn inward. They start asking what they did, what they said, whether they were too much, or not enough, or somehow both at the same time. But here's what they don't realize, what almost no one realizes. The pulling away had almost nothing to do with them. Imagine this. You've been talking to someone for a few weeks. Maybe longer. It's been effortless in the way that real connection is effortless. Not because there are no moments of friction, but because even the friction feels worth navigating. You find yourself thinking about them during ordinary moments. A song. A particular kind of light in the afternoon. You notice you're making small space for them inside your life without even deciding to. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, something shifts. They don't respond with the same warmth. The texts that used to arrive quickly now come hours later, and feel different when they do. More measured. More distant. Like they're choosing their words with more care than before. And you feel it before you can name it. That faint, low-frequency unease. The sense that something invisible has changed. You replay conversations. You wonder if you came on too strong, or revealed too much, or asked for something you shouldn't have asked for. You start modulating yourself, pulling back a little, giving them space, and still, the distance remains. This is not a rare experience. This is one of the most common and least understood patterns in human connection. And this is where it gets interesting. Because what's happening in that moment? What's really happening beneath the surface isn't indifference. It isn't disinterest. It isn't even a decision that was consciously made. What's happening is something far more complicated, and far more human, than most people allow themselves to consider. When people pull away as closeness increases, it is almost never about the person they're pulling away from. It is about what closeness itself triggers inside them. Think about that for a moment. Closeness, real intimacy, real vulnerability. The sensation of actually being known by another person does not feel safe to everyone. For some people, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. But for others, intimacy triggers something that lives much deeper than thought. Something that was formed long before they ever met you. There's a term in psychology, emotional avoidance. But that phrase flattens something that is actually very textured and complex. Because it isn't that avoidant people don't want connection. Most of the time, they want it more than they can articulate. They're drawn toward it. And then, when they get close enough to actually touch it, something inside them pulls the emergency brake. Not consciously. Not with intent. It just happens. And the person on the receiving end is left trying to interpret a behavior that even the person doing it doesn't fully understand. But most people don't notice this. They assume the other person is being cold, or manipulative, or emotionally unavailable. And sometimes, those things are true. But far more often, what's underneath that withdrawal is something closer to fear. A specific, deeply conditioned kind of fear. Here's what it actually feels like from the inside, from the perspective of the person pulling away. They feel the connection growing. And at first, it feels good. It feels like warmth moving into cold places. But then, something else activates. A quiet alarm. A kind of anticipatory grief. Because somewhere in their nervous system, closeness has been associated not with safety, but with eventual loss, or suffocation, or the particular pain of being truly seen and then rejected. And so, without fully understanding why, they begin to create distance. Not to hurt you, but to protect themselves from something that hasn't even happened yet. This is the part that changes everything. They are not pulling away from you. They are pulling away from what connection has historically meant. From what they have learned, through experience, through early relationships, through patterns that became blueprints, that intimacy tends to lead to. And that blueprint runs so deep it operates below the level of conscious choice. And now consider what this feels like from your side. You're experiencing someone who initially gave you something real. Something that felt genuine and warm and reciprocal. And then gradually withheld it without explanation. And the absence of explanation is its own kind of cruelty, even when it isn't intended as one. Because the human mind, faced with silence and distance, doesn't sit still. It fills the gap with meaning. And the meaning it tends to reach for first is the most painful one. I wasn't enough. I did something wrong. They realized something about me that made them reconsider. And you carry that meaning. You walk around with it. But here's the silent truth no one speaks clearly enough. The story you told yourself in that silence was almost certainly wrong. Because what they couldn't tell you, what they may not have even had the language to tell themselves, is that they got scared. Not of you, specifically, but of what you represented. Of what it would mean to actually let someone in. Of the specific vulnerability of being seen clearly, without armor, and trusting that the other person would stay. That trust, for some people, is not something they can access easily. Maybe they had it once and lost it in a way that left marks they haven't fully recognized yet. Maybe they never had it modeled for them growing up, never watched two people be genuinely close without it eventually collapsing. Whatever the origin, the result is the same. Closeness triggers retreat, and the retreat looks, from the outside, like rejection. And this is where it gets quietly devastating. Because sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the person pulling away actually cares deeply. Maybe more than they've allowed themselves to acknowledge. And the caring itself is part of what makes them run. Because you can only be hurt by what matters to you. And if someone matters, if the connection is real and the stakes feel high, then the risk feels unbearable to someone whose nervous system learned early that love is not a safe place. So they create distance. And in creating distance, they feel a particular kind of relief. The threat of loss recedes. The vulnerability closes back up. They can breathe again. And they tell themselves a story, consciously or not, that the connection wasn't that important, that they're better this way, that independence is simpler. But look closely. Because underneath that story, if you're quiet enough to listen, there's something else. A low, persistent ache. The faint recognition of something they wanted and moved away from. A loss they created before they could be handed one. People don't always leave because they don't care. Sometimes they leave because they care too much, and have never learned how to hold that without it feeling like standing on the edge of something terrifying. And now we arrive at the question that matters most, not, how do I make them stay, not, what do I do, but something quieter and more honest than either of those. What does this actually mean? It means that the patterns in how someone approaches closeness have very little to do with you as a person, and almost everything to do with what they've internalized about what closeness does to people. It means that distance is not always a measure of disinterest. Sometimes it's a measure of capacity. And capacity is not fixed, but it's also not something you can simply give someone. It means the silence that felt like an answer probably wasn't. It was more like a symptom. A signal of something unresolved inside them that existed long before you arrived, and will continue existing after you leave. And somewhere in understanding that, really absorbing it, not just intellectually but in the place where you've been holding that quiet shame, something can shift. It was never about you not being enough. It was about what they couldn't handle. Not because of weakness exactly, but because of history. Because of what they learned, and what they came to expect, and what protection felt necessary when the alternative felt too risky to consider. There's a particular kind of grief that lives in this realization. Because it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't bring back the warmth. It doesn't resolve the silence or explain the moments when you reached out and found nothing. But it changes the texture of how you hold what happened. It removes the story where the problem was you, where you were too much or not enough or somehow fundamentally flawed in a way that made someone pull away. And in place of that story, it offers something more complicated and more true. They were afraid. They were limited. They didn't have the tools, or the safety, or the particular kind of courage that staying in real closeness requires from people who have been hurt by it before. And that is a different thing entirely. Pause here for a moment. Think about a specific person. A specific moment when you felt someone moving away just as things were becoming real. Feel the texture of that. The confusion. The quiet way you started adjusting yourself, shrinking, trying to figure out what you'd done. Now consider the possibility that you never needed to adjust anything. That the pulling away was happening inside them long before it appeared between you. That the distance had nothing to do with your worth or your presence or the quality of what you were offering. That it was the natural consequence of someone encountering what they most wanted, and being unable, for reasons rooted in old pain, to receive it. There's something that happens when you truly absorb this. Not as a thought, but as a felt understanding. The wound doesn't disappear, but the shape of it changes. Because you were carrying the wrong story. You were holding a version of events where the problem lived inside you. And it didn't. People who pull away when closeness deepens are not broken. They're not villains. They're not even necessarily wrong about their own needs. They are people in conflict, wanting what they're afraid of, moving toward what they then retreat from, genuinely uncertain of how to stay in something that feels this significant. And you are not the answer to that conflict. You were never supposed to be. Some things take time. Some things take a different kind of safety than one person can build alone. Some patterns only change when the person living inside them chooses, consciously, slowly, with tremendous effort, to examine them. And that is not something you can do for someone else. What you can do is stop making their retreat mean something about you. Stop measuring your worth against someone else's capacity. Stop shrinking yourself to fit inside the space their fear allows. Because here is what the silence was never telling you, even though it felt like it was. You were not the reason they left. You were the reason it felt like something worth protecting against. And maybe, somewhere in the complicated, difficult, very human truth of that, there is something that feels less like loss, and more like clarity. Not a resolution. Not an ending that wraps cleanly. Just a different way of seeing what happened. And maybe, that's where it all begins. If this video has sparked thoughts or feelings that are hard to put into words, consider subscribing to explore more. Please like the video to support the channel. And share your reflections in the comments. Your insights may help others understand themselves more deeply. Farewell for now. See you in the next journey.